Hey guys and gals, make sure to visit iknowthisguy.com, where you can find blogs, show notes, transcripts of all the episodes, and even a slick selection of merch. I'm really pushing to get I Know This Guy dog bibs up there, so make sure to check back for that soon. If you're feeling super generous, you can even buy us a coffee through Patreon. Check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/iknowthisguy. Thanks so much for your continued support. The show really wouldn't exist without you. And that's enough of me. Now for the rest of the show.
And I had one client, I mean, he just wrote me. He's a hoot. I met him when he was 20. He's about to turn 28. And the last letter he wrote, he goes, I have to tell you, I never thought I'd call an old white lady my friend, right? And deep down in there's a compliment, okay?
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of I Know This Guy, the podcast where we dive deep into the lives of some of the most interesting people I know. Before we get started, please like and subscribe to I Know This Guy wherever you get your podcasts. By the way, my kids want me to say something about ringing a bell. What the hell's a bell?
Tell the folks at home what they need to know, Dad.
Okay, I'll try to do that. Anyways, Hayden, I have a real special guest today. Her name is Elena Saris, and she's a public defender. She's a stand-up comedian, and she's a very successful entrepreneur. So anyways, the whole podcast will make you laugh a little bit, and it'll probably bring a few tears to your eyes.
It's nothing I love more than a good cry laugh.
Yeah, you're very good at cry laughing.
I am. I was doing it just before the show.
Oh, was it something I said?
It's always something you said.
All right, let's get to this. My favorite lady, Elena, how are you?
I'm well. I just got to go to the hairdresser since before I saw you last, so I'm happy. I don't know, it just feels like light and breezy, and I feel like I don't look older, and I don't know, it's like a little bit of normalcy.
I can't wait to get into this because you're such an amazing lady. I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's get into some backstory.
Okay, I grew up in Pasadena, California, where I still live now. I did move out to Chicago for college and realized that my blood and body were not made for 0-degree temperatures. So I hightailed it back. And I can't imagine living anywhere else, but I'm going to explore some now that I've got a little more freedom going on. And I just love the weather. I can't, I grew up on, quote, the wrong side of the tracks in Pasadena. There were 6 of us in a 2-bedroom house. I shared a room with my folks until I was 13. That was awkward. My sister and I had like the sitting room of their room, which was sort of like this brick cold thing that there was like a detached garage, and then they attached the garage to the house to give this like sort of poor man's sitting room, and that became my sister and my bedroom, and there was no door between our rooms, so it was but we had a pool, oddly enough. So we were like solidly upper lower class / lower middle class, which would have been fine, except for my wonderful mother was very big on education and found a very cutting edge school. And the cutting edge school was called Carden at the time, Carden of the Foothills. And it didn't believe in homework, and it had a completely different way of teaching. We read Shakespeare in the 5th grade. We were fluent in French by the 6th grade. We were not treated as little babies. We were expected to do really high level things. And it was very weak in the science department. I will say science and math were probably not their strong suits, but in terms of everything else, we took the PSAT, and we actually, as a class of like 6 or 7 people, ranked in California, like we were in the top 5 percentile or top 10 percentile as 6th graders. So it was one room, and it had all the grades in one room, like Little House on the Prairie. I mean, it was just bizarre, in the back of a church. it was somewhat religious, but not terribly religious. I mean, looking back, like the plays were, Christmassy themed, and we said prayers, but it wasn't overly, I don't want to say overly religious, but you know what I mean? It was part of the curriculum, but we didn't, mostly in songs and kid stuff. Right. But I say that to say, when we got out of that, the big private schools in the community offered us scholarships. It was like everybody wanted one of those, like we were some science experiment. And I was thrust into this world of incredibly, ridiculously wealthy people. I mean, not just wealthy, like, some Dubai person had their daughter, the princess, in the 4th grade, and the president of Coca-Cola's daughter was there, and the founder of, Trader Joe's daughter was there. And just like people that had real access to things that I had only seen on TV. I would sit in the cul-de-sac where the cars would come and drop people off so that we could see the DeLorean doors open, and just the silliest things that, the kids took for granted that I just thought were so amazing, even with the uniforms, just being able to afford the uniforms was a real stretch for my family. So it was an interesting experience about have and have not. And I think it affected me in 2 ways. One, badly, because I didn't think a lot of the parents were particularly nice, the ones that I met, and they weren't the ones I just listed. Okay, just FYI. They didn't treat people well, and I thought that's what being rich meant. And so I noticed an arrogance about them, even if they had inherited their money or inherited their business. I noticed the way they looked down on my family. Like I was invited over, but like just certain things they said, like it was our fault that we weren't. I don't know. I just noticed a divide that was very bad. The good thing that I noticed was that this was possible. That there were a couple people who that generation were the ones that made the money. And that was interesting to me. Like, oh yeah, we can do this. Like it's a possibility. But it never made me want to make a whole lot of money. It made me want to help the underdog. It made me want to, speak up for the downtrodden. But I got incredible education out of it. Incredible. And, college and everything. It was probably some of the best schools in the country, to be perfectly honest.
I'm just kind of curious, when you went to your friend's house, were there any parents that you kind of went, wow, these guys are awesome?
Most of them, no. I mean, some of them gave us jobs, which was nice, but they didn't treat us well. And they thought that, I just never felt, I didn't have a lot of experience with the parents at their houses. It was mostly what I saw from them at school. We didn't really have kids over to the house because there wasn't a lot of room, and we weren't really allowed to spend the night at houses because my parents were like East Coast traditional, you have to reciprocate, and we couldn't reciprocate because where would they sleep, So it wasn't until maybe high school that I really got the impression, when I really was able to like sort of form my opinions that, oh yeah, you know what, these guys aren't really nice. Like I guess it would just be like walking through a restaurant with them and watching them treat certain people differently. That's right. What I noticed. And it was subtle. It wasn't like anyone was overtly racist or mean. It was just this subtlety of, I'm above you. And I thought, wow, that's what, and then eventually I started to meet, the cooler people. And then I was like, oh yeah. And then as I got older, I started to meet people whose money allowed them to do really good things for people. And I think that was a huge turning point, because prior to that, I think I had these sort of subconscious psychological things like money make you greedy. Money, I did very well in law school, and I went to become a public defender. I never, ever wanted to do anything else. I went to law school to be a public defender. I didn't even know what it was. I was actually at the top journalism school in the country at Northwestern, and I thought I wanted to be a journalist. I used to work all the time. I would deliver for Domino's Pizza. I was the only female delivery driver in Cook County at the time, Chicago. And then at night, I worked at our business hotel. And I was the one saying, why can't I work overnight? And they wouldn't let a woman work the overnight shift at the front desk because, like really, what's like a 19-year-old guy going to do that, a 19-year-old girl, none of us we're not going to defend your hotel for you. We're the ones checking somebody in. We're just going to be held up differently. I don't know. But I met one of the ladies who was staying there, and she's asking me what I want to do. And she goes, well, if you want to do that, why don't you go to law school? I said, why would I go to law school if I kind of want to change the world by telling people stories? And she says, you could be a public defender. And I'm like, well, I thought about the ACLU. And she's like, ACLU? So they sit around their computer and they write motions all day. You need to be in front of a jury. And I didn't even know what a public defender was. And that was it. I signed up for the LSAT the next week, and I got into not my top law school, not my second law school, but the one that gave me a full scholarship. And I said, you tell me where to park, I will be there, which happened to be back in Los Angeles. And I wound up going to law school, interning for the public defender's office. They offered me a job, and I stayed those 2 years while I graduated, and 25 years after that. Never wrote a resume in my life. Didn't have to. I just was there, and it was great. And I got to the top of my field. I mean, as a public defender, I won 75% of my cases, which is, that means you take every case that walks in the door. So if your client's on camera, which by the way, I did have, I had a case where my client was accused of shooting someone. That part's not funny, but had a Hollywood director come and put an X on the street and said, listen, if you want to get caught by the neighbor's video camera, the jeans factory down the street, and the 7-Eleven, you must stand precisely here. You can't stand 6 inches to the left or right, or you won't be on all views. And of course, that's exactly where he stood when he did the shooting. Ladies and gentlemen, who are you going to believe, me or your eyes? Right? That didn't work. So, but my point is, that's the kind of cases we get. So to win any is a big deal.
Now, I just want to, go on the record and saying, when I sent you over DA, I did mean defense attorney.
Oh, see, DA really means district attorney. And I said, no, I fight for the good guys. But I will say that, I mean, obviously DAs are very important. I made this conscious decision a long time into my career because everyone was like, why aren't you on that side, putting bad people in jail? And I realized it was because of my ability to connect with people and my ability to connect with jurors and and I think this is what's helped me in business as well, because if you were to say like one of my main strengths in business, Norm, what would you say it would be?
Oh, it would be your networking.
There it is. So when I network, what I do is I make a point of, number one, never charging for that. Number two, finding people, knowing what people want and knowing how to connect those two people together. So it's not just the fact that I throw a really good party, which by the way, I throw a really good party. It's connecting people with the people that are coming. And because I say, what is it you want? What is it you need? How can we help? And what I found when I was in the criminal justice system was it really doesn't take a lot of empathy. It takes a lot of strength to be a prosecutor, to see the inhumanity that people do to one another, right? But to have the first thought that most people have when they see that inhumanity is punishment. And the first thought I have is, how did this person get this way, that they felt compelled to do this? And I thought it would be wrong for someone like me with that gift/curse to be putting people in jail when I've never had a client that didn't feel like I loved them, that didn't feel like I was there for them, that most of my clients, I was the first person in their life that cared about them and that to whom they mattered, and to this day, 3 years after I retired, 10 years after I've done cases, I still write my clients. I mean, I get, I just got a letter from one of my clients in jail yesterday, and I write them back every time they write me. I don't care, how long it's been. I feel like I showed up for them, and I was able to show jurors I did nothing but death penalty defense in the last 10 years. And when you do death penalty defense, I mean, by then the odds of someone being completely factually innocent are not as high because they've gone through so many layers of vetting. I did have 2 of the clients that I had probably that I just 100% factually innocent. They were devastating cases, but it's a goal just to get them to not have death. But beyond that, it's a goal to get them to feel like even if they get life without parole, which is what the guy that was on camera got, to sort of change his mindset in the process of making that life livable still. You know what I'm saying? Mm. So when you're able to tell a jury that the person next to you might have done this heinous act, but he really is somebody's brother or somebody's father or somebody's sister, and you're really able to convey that, not just say that, I think that's what made me successful. Because when it wasn't the death penalty, it was like, we all know to give someone the benefit of the doubt, you have to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. But we also know that if someone's arrested and you walk in the courtroom as a jury, the first thing you say is, oh, I wonder what that guy did, right? Not exactly you're presumed innocent, right? I wonder what that guy did, especially if he looks like central casting Hollywood gang member, which I think somehow 90% of my clients look like central casting Hollywood. So I really, that's what the hardest part of leaving my job was. The hardest part was, if I leave, who's going to take care of these people?
And one of the things, like when we first met, just what you're talking about there, is just you could tell right away you were interested. And I mean, we ended up just sitting beside each other at a dinner. And, when you were asking questions about what I did or just wanted to know a bit more, and you really did want to help. That's
Hmm.
one of the things I remember is that you brought it out of me. Okay, who can I connect you? This is exactly what you said. Who can I connect you with that, we just kind of, talked a bit, and you were on the phone waking people up in the middle of the night. Remember that?
I
Oh, you got
do.
to come down and you got to meet Norm. You really did that. And
Yeah.
that was,
Well, wait, in
the
fairness,
first,
those people were at the conference that I woke up. It wasn't like they were home sleeping. They were at the conference. They
no, but
just
they
didn't
were
stay
in
out as
bed at
late.
the
Right.
conference.
Come on. We're in Mexico at an all-inclusive resort. What are you doing in bed? We got networking to
Yeah, exactly.
do.
I don't know what you'd be like if there was just a real schlump there. You know what I mean
Hmm.
by a schlump?
Hmm.
Just a
Yeah.
jerk, right? I, how would you react to that person? Would you have asked them the same questions as you asked me? Would you really try to, befriend them and help them along the way?
I think it depends. I mean, certainly most of my clients were not nice people when I met them. I mean, they weren't even nice to me. It's like, how dumb do you have to be mean to the person standing between you and a metal cage for the rest of your life, right? But
Mm.
it wasn't dumb. It was just absolutely no social skills. They never had the behavior to model to know how to be. So at an event like that, if someone had been that way, I probably wouldn't give them the time of day.
Right.
Right? Because who would I introduce that person to? I have to think about it on that end. I mean, it's not like I walk up to everybody and meet them and think, what kind of transaction I can make. It's just in my nature to see, beyond like, and I also have what I call the client vibe. Like my girlfriends used to introduce me to their boyfriends. They'd be like, hey, I want you to meet this guy because after 25 years of dealing with the criminal element, I kind of have a real highly tuned bullshit monitor. And I would say, client vibe, get away. I was pretty much on. And so I feel like if someone comes to me, from a good place, even if they're kind of tone deaf about how they do it, then I'm going to try and understand them. I read, I think, I don't know who said this, but it was like the perfect sort of explanation of it. It's sometimes being heard and being loved are so similar in how they feel to a person, it's difficult to tell the difference. And so I think if in the environment we were at, it was a networking event. That was the goal. I mean, I wouldn't walk up to somebody in a bar necessarily and say, "Hey, who are you? What do you need?" But we were in a professional business environment, and I wanted to know what brought you there, what could we do, and I knew almost everybody at the event, so I was hoping to say, "Hey, there's only 3 days. Let me hook you up with someone who might help while we're all here in this mindset, right?" And then at work, when I was at work, some people just wanted to know the law. It was like that's all they wanted, and other people just wanted me to visit every week. And I had one client. I mean, he just wrote me. He said, I met him when he was 20. He's about to turn 28. And the last letter he wrote, he goes, I have to tell you, I never thought I'd call an old white lady my friend, right? And deep down in there's a compliment, okay? But when I first met him, I mean, he didn't talk to me for 8 months, 6 months maybe. But I went to see him every week, and sometimes he didn't come out just to test me. Like, is she still gonna show? And then, after our second jury trial, and we'd known each other 4 or 5 years, he said, "Tell me the truth, Miss Saris. Am I the longest relationship you've ever had?" But he was making a joke out of his way of saying that to me. Said, "Thank you for always doing what you said you were going to do and being where you said you were going to be." And that was what was important to him. So that kind of feels that way to me. And I think that translates into everything. It doesn't just make me a good networker, but a lot of people who do networking, they're not well versed in what people want and need. It's just throwing everybody in a room and seeing what
Right.
happens, right? And I try, like, when I throw a party in a business setting, I try and invite people, like, who can I have in the room for you to meet, not just who shows up, right? Like, oh yeah, I know Norman's doing, like, for instance, right now, if we still had Vegas coming up, ASD, and I knew you wanted to, I have 3 or 4 people who teach podcasting, who have podcasts. I mean, I know you're doing it great and your son's great at this and all, but I mean, I would introduce you to somebody with a long-term podcast to tell you, hey, after 3 years, this is what happens. So that you have, that kind of, I would make that point to bring that person in.
You're kind of a bigwig when it comes to being a defense attorney. You've been on tons of magazines. You've even been on A&E. It was A&E, wasn't it?
Well, it was 48 hours.
48 hours.
And I was the cover of one magazine, California Lawyer, one time. Okay, you sound like my dad bragging on me here. But no, I mean, I teach people how to be better lawyers, and yeah, I'm good at it. And it's funny, I'm unabashed about saying that. And I think you need a certain level of arrogance to be a criminal defense lawyer. And I think a lot of people have the arrogance, but they don't have how to back it up. I don't think I try very hard not to carry that into the other aspects of my life. I definitely think I'm just learning in this e-com world. I mean, I'm doing 7 figures and I still feel like a little kid. Like, wait, you want me to get messages by pressing 1? Wait, what? Doesn't work.
So we haven't even touched on the other side, and probably people could already tell.
Did you know what this is?
Oh yeah, I had to explain.
I used to play putt-putt on those.
Yeah, I remember those days of putt-putt.
Floppy disks.
Yeah, floppy disks. I used to think a hard drive was, you know how they used to have the 3 1/4 inch disks?
Yeah.
I thought that was a hard drive because they were hard and they weren't floppy anymore.
I thought it was the back end of the computer. Like, I couldn't believe people were like walking. I was like, I thought that was, I'm terrible. I didn't get on Facebook till I started my business.
And now you're just dominating it.
I'm dominating.
You're not doing bad, right?
I'm not doing badly. I'm doing ads, but I still don't know how to post. I mean, I think I went to Africa. I posted pictures of Africa, and that was 2015. I mean, I don't know what to post.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the other side of you, which is people don't know that you were a comic, which I guess they can probably tell by now. But you were a stand-up comedian for a bit, weren't you?
Yeah. So it was the weirdest way. I always tell people I got into e-commerce, the normal way, going through law school, so I got into comedy by going to law school, being a lawyer, and then having a severe dental issue. You know the phrase, ignore your teeth and they'll go away? Well, I didn't really go to the dentist till I was 28 years old. Okay, I was not raised in Appalachia. It's just a fact. I don't know why. It just was. And of course, there were some issues. Not a lot of issues, actually, relatively speaking. But when I was 32, I needed to get braces. And it was when you're 32 and you need to get the braces that you should have had as a 10-year-old, things get very complicated. They actually had to split my palate. When you're 10, your palate's malleable, so it's no big deal. When you're 32, it's a little bit of torture. I mean, you have to put a little key on this thing. And anyway, long story. During the day, I had to wear rubber bands that cut my mouth like this. And because I worked for the county of Los Angeles, they thought, what do we do with this person who's smart but can't go to jury? So they made me a boss. So they put me in charge of some of the brand new lawyers who were, in awe of just being a lawyer. So they didn't care that they had to listen twice as hard to understand a word I said. But the court was an arraignment court, meaning that it was just people running in and saying guilty or not guilty, and then they moved on to the next court. So it was the first time at that point, 8 or 9 years of being a lawyer where I didn't have anything to do at night. And I just went down to the local community center and took a course on being a comic. I'd always been interested in it. I'd always tell jokes. And, we did the last night of the event where you present, and this guy who owned a comedy club was in the house. And he said, hey, I got Thursday nights free. I'd like you to have Thursday nights. And I said, what does that mean? You want me to perform on Thursday? And he goes, no, I want to give you Thursday night. You bring the comics, you do everything. And so the Ha Ha Cafe in North Hollywood, we had the show called Out for Laughs for almost 2 years, I think, a year and a half. And I brought in a bunch of comics that you'd recognize now that you may not know their names, but they had HBO specials at the time. You remember the show Last Comic Standing was the first reality show about almost all those guys had been on the stage. And I didn't have any work, I didn't have anybody's life in my hands. It was kind of like, I don't know what to do with myself. Like all of a sudden my nights are free. I don't have to work 12 hours and people liked me. They liked that I was real. They liked that I wasn't, trying to do anything. I didn't talk, the best comics don't really have a shtick. They just talk, right? Jerry Seinfeld, they have a shtick in the sense that kind of their perspective. And that's what comics, if you get a perspective. And so I sort of caught on to that pretty early and had a great time. It was a blast.
So is there anything the average person wouldn't put 2 and 2 together as a lawyer and a comic?
getting up on stage in front of people for sure. That's pretty obvious.
Right.
People sometimes when you're in a comedy club, some people want to have a good time and other people are predisposed to dislike you. Right. Jurors are predisposed to dislike anyone who's defending anyone who's done anything really bad.
Right.
So my comedy skills help me in misdemeanor trials. Like if someone is accused of stealing, we could make jokes during the prelim or during the jury selection, right? If someone is accused of child molestation, you can't make jokes during jury selection, right? So I think that's part of it. And I think there's a kind of a loneliness factor to it, which is I don't think most people would think of. Like you can make an entire room, usually of couples and people who come as friends, laugh all night, and everybody gets to go home with somebody but you. Right? And everybody gets to go home and talk about how funny you were and repeat the joke to each other. And you're by yourself alone thinking, was I funny? Should I have said that? And when you're doing a jury trial, like, let's say, you won it. Like for me, there was a trial that was intense, incredibly intense. And it went through 2 jurors. So one jury hung and I had to have protection during the trial because the woman that had been killed, I was blaming her husband and his brother. And the brother was a gang member. And so they didn't take kindly to that. And so we won the trial. It was incredible. Even though the DEA, the sheriffs, and the LAPD said my client's fingerprints were on the murder weapon, I was able to go to like a fingerprint school and argue that they were wrong. And it was crazy. So when I won, I had to be escorted down to the garage to go home. And here I had, freed this guy, saved his life. He was off to get out of jail and go to his family. And I couldn't even go upstairs to my colleagues and celebrate, and I remember thinking, wow, this is great, but who do I call? You're on the phone. It was just so and then if you lose, the absolute loneliest walk in the world is when you've lost a case where you think your client is innocent or guilty of something less, and the walk from that room to your car.
Right.
And I think Brian Stevenson said that in the guy who wrote the book Just Mercy that has been out. And so if any of you out there, I guess it's 3 more days. Just Mercy is a great book about a defense lawyer in the appellate stages who gets people who were previously convicted who are on death row off death row. So for my last 10 years, it was making sure people didn't get to be on death row. So the pressure, and somebody had said this to me years earlier, you don't realize how much pressure you were under until you stop. Like it just seems normal, right? Like, what's the expression? I never knew how drunk that guy was till I saw him sober. Like you had no idea. Like I had no idea when I quit my job the first time and I got up at 10 a.m. to go for a walk, and I just had the stupidest grin on my face. I mean, most courthouses you can imagine are not in prime real estate areas. So when you go for a walk at lunch in a courthouse, it's usually urine smelling, homeless people, your clients walking, and here I am in downtown, Old Town Pasadena going for a walk at 10 a.m. and I'm walking to be like, I just won the lottery. And it was like, I'm walking at 10 a.m. It's 10 a.m. and I'm walking and people are like, yeah, 10 a.m. I'm walking too. What? But, I didn't have a motion to write. I didn't have anyone's parent calling me, is my child going to die? I didn't have any of that. And that took me a full 6 to 8 months to sort of fell into. And then once I did, which happened to correspond with when the business replaced my lawyer income with this freedom in my mind, creativity, because what's going to happen to this kid versus, holy shoot, I just gave up a law job to sell stuff online. How am I going to pay for this? And I'll tell you where my mindset was. I actually moved out of my swank condo into a 600 square foot tiny little bungalow, just so that my rent could be under $1,500, so that if worst case scenario, everything bombed, I could make it with my pension. And I stayed there for 2 years, even though I could make it, just to prove, just in my head that is something I'm struggling with to this day, that sense that it could all be taken away tomorrow, because when I was a kid, even though I described some funny things, I mean, we were not poor by poor standards. We were poor by private school standards, private school kid standards. You see what I'm saying? So I think there's a lot of people in this country who would have thought I lived very well as a kid, and I absolutely did. And I'm not trying to say we went to bed hungry, but when you're juxtaposed to this incredible wealth, it felt poor. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so I think I am still overcoming that sense of lack, even though it's all in my head. I work on that every day.
Yeah, that shocks me because I know you as being very confident, and for you to, pull back and say, I'm going to go into a smaller place because I don't, if get me, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but you didn't have the confidence that you were going to succeed. Is that
I
correct?
hadn't, remember I was talking about that sometimes people are jerks because they haven't seen good behavior modeled.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't seen someone my age with no prior experience. I hadn't seen that modeled before. I hadn't seen anyone succeed that looked like me. So I was surrounded by 26-year-old kids who grew up with the internet who were succeeding and who had a safety net because a lot of them lived at home or their parents were there with money. Now, my parents had passed long by then. I was sort of the person in the family that my siblings went to if something happened bad and they needed money. So I felt a responsibility there, but I didn't see it modeled. I'm seeing it modeled more and more now. Even now, you don't see a lot of women in the e-commerce space really crushing it. So I think yes, I take responsibility for my subconscious sort of, mindset lack. That was a problem then, but I also really didn't believe that it was going to, could not necessarily was going to happen soon enough, like timeline enough, because I hadn't seen a woman over 40 doing any of that.
How did you get around that?
Succeeding, quite frankly. Yeah. I mean, showing myself I could do it. And then just doing a lot of work on the mindset, just doing a lot of work on what, falling back on a law degree where I'm, where I can charge $600 an hour for my skills. That's a pretty good plan B, right? It's not like, oh, I got to go back and clean toilets,
Yeah, I remember when you said that you were going to retire. You're making how much?
And I mean, imagine that's you knowing what was available online, being successful online. Imagine the lawyers that were my friends going, you are crazy. You are on drugs, and I literally told them, hey, just so you know, in the next 2 months, just the next 2 months that I'm sitting here in front of you, I'm going to make more with those 2 months together than I did my last year as a lawyer. Yeah. And they would be like, I hate you. That's usually the first, but I also, in fairness to them, I had the responsibility of like major disaster with my family. If something happened to one of my brothers or, in terms of money, but I don't have kids. I didn't have a spouse. I didn't own there was nothing on my time. And I knew that if I did not leave then that I would stay, because the way that the county is structured, you retire here and you get 37% of your income, but you stay 5 more years, you'll get 45% of your income. And now all of a sudden you're 5 years old. Wait, 5 more years and you can get 6. And then it's just like, and a lot of my friends had retired and died. I'd had 3 friends that died within a year of their retirement. Mm. And my parents both passed away in their 70s. And I'm like, nope, I'm done. I'm just done. And it was the best decision I ever made. And then I had to get around what I was telling you about earlier, which was this guilt of, and I notice this with women more, but I know it happens with men. When you have a profession that is your calling and you think, how dare you go off on your own and just to be somebody or just to make money? Like there's a, because one of the ways that we reassured ourselves when we were poor, young, starving lawyers, I don't know it was like 47,000. We didn't make to say 47,000, depending on where you live, is a big deal. But in LA, that was nothing. And I remember my colleagues wanted to go for a drink and beer was $6. A beer was $6. And I just remember thinking, I can eat for the weekend or I can buy, I was top ramen noodling it at that point. And you're telling me that this is what you guys do every night and you had 3 beer. Like the idea that you would spend $20 on $20 could buy you like 2 things of like Polygirl or whatever the 2 6-packs back then. You're like, you're going to do that on 3 beers? Like it was insane to me. I digress. So, but it was just, that's how we reassured ourselves. We were doing God's work. I mean, I said that all the time and I believe that all the time. We were doing something that other people, even if they did it for a paycheck, we were doing it because we were true believers, right? And so now I'm just going to go make money. I mean, other people did that. Other people just made money. We were saving the world. And it wasn't until I was able to make my first like real big donation or helping of someone that I realized, you know what, I can do this another way. But I distinctly remember I was sitting in church and I was just going crazy over this decision just before retiring. And I saw three of my friends, like about 12 rows up. And yeah, for the podcast, they're pointing to this guy and making talking handsome puppets with their hands. And this guy starts walking towards me and I have no idea what the heck is going on. And he comes over and he goes, your friends say you're in the midst of making this tough decision. And I said, yeah, like, who is this dude and why are they sending this stranger to me in church? I mean, church, the service was over, by the way, we weren't interrupting anything. And he says, I just want you to know, I was called to the priesthood and I served for 20 years. And then I had a new calling. And he goes, and I left and now I'm doing this. And it was some amazing thing that I was totally excited about. And he does the whole, the genuflect. And he says, I just want you to know it's called chapter 2 and you're allowed. And he put his hands up like I was getting this blessing. And I thought, like, God shot. Yeah, I am allowed. Like, what? Yeah. Like, no one said I had to, because at that point in my career, I was soul weary. I'm not saying it's a young person's game, but to do it at the level I did it at the trial court, it was a young person's game. And I was done, and I didn't want to be bitter about my job and I didn't want to be bitter about anything. And so stepping out into this, and now I'm helping other people saying, look, I know what you thought, you're a nurse. Can you imagine being a nurse now and thinking, I got to get out of here? But gosh, who's going to save these people? Who's going to do this? And, in order to be good at your job, you really have to think you're the best one at it. So it's a little bit of arrogance to say, if I leave, who's going to defend these people? Well, there's still 750 public defenders in Los Angeles County. So it was sort of a ripple that they barely noticed me. But in my head, I was doing it at this level that made me feel like it's not okay. And I will say it took me about a year and a half to get past that. And once I was past that and I realized, look what I can do with, disposable income now. I don't talk about what I do with my money, but there's a lot of great sites out there happening right now. You can buy like random family groceries every week. You can donate, computers to schools where kids can't be online right now that I never could have done when I was a public defender. I just wouldn't, first off, I wouldn't have had the time to explore that sort of thing. And second off, I didn't really have that kind of disposable income.
So let's get into what you're doing, because you've gone from the law into e-com. So how did you get there and what are you doing?
So it started out wanting to help people become better lawyers. And I started a video series teaching people how to be better at their job. And I was trying to figure out how to market it. And someone said, take a class on advertising on Facebook. And I, of course, said, what's Facebook? And then when they showed me Facebook, I'm like, it looks like people putting up cat videos and taking pictures of donuts. Like, why would you could advertise on this thing? And there was a class, shout out, Don Wilson, Facebook ads cracked, and a website called Teespring. And you could design your own t-shirt with zero skills. Lord knows I have none. And it was the website that had the landing page, the way to take a credit card. You told them how many shirts you thought you were going to sell. They gave you the price that you were going to pay for it. You sold it for whatever you wanted. And it was the Wild West of Facebook ads. And I put up a shirt and they sent me a check for $10,000. I still have a picture of it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I just put up a shirt that had some funny text on it and it made $10,000. And all in that month, those 4 or 5 months, I must have cleared 30 grand. And I thought, well, now I know how to advertise. I'll advertise my law thing. And as I was finishing it up, one of the other people in the group, he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I've got this lawyer thing. And he goes, oh, you're going to help lawyers get clients. And I go, well, no, I don't know how to help lawyers get clients. I had plenty of clients. If you can't afford a lawyer, one will be appointed to you. Believe me, I had clients lining up the door. That's me, right? If you ever hear that on TV. So no, well, you're going to help them charge more. And I'm like, well, no, I got paid. And he goes, listen, you can't do that. I go, I can't do what? He goes, you can't. People won't buy that to be better. I go, what do you mean? People won't pay to be better? He goes, no. You gotta teach something that helps people get laid, get skinny, or get paid. That's it. Those are the only 3 things online that people are going to pay for. Being better at their job is not one of them. And it was sort of a rude awakening. And then all of a sudden, this ad pops up on my Facebook feed that says, or I think it was email, learn how to sell on Amazon. And I was like, sell on Amazon? Amazon sells on Amazon. And that was it. That's what started it.
How long ago was that?
2014.
Wow.
Yeah. And I had the number 2 supplement on Amazon for a while. It was a probiotic supplement. I didn't know what a probiotic supplement it was. That's what the Wild West was. I had to look that puppy up, but I designed a nice little label. I put that, and a friend of mine and I, we were competing, and then I think it was ASM3, so then ASM4 opened. And for those of you who don't know, ASM is an amazing selling machine, and it's a course that taught regular folks how to sell on Amazon. And all of a sudden, I'm like, not number 2, I'm number 4, and I'm having to give away, and I'm like, and I saw the writing on the wall, and I'm like, I'm getting out of supplements. And then my friend like skyrocketed up, and I'm like, what are you, dude? And he goes, hey, we put in 75 grand. And I have to tell you, even now, 75 grand is a crazy amount of money. Like, if I ever think $75,000 is not a lot of money, you have my permission to just come over and slap me. And he was like, not only was he like, they were like number 2 in the business, I think they got picked up by another company. So it was well worth the investment, but that was not the level I was playing at. This was a hobby to me. This was like, this is kind of cool. There's this computer thing and it gives you money, you know? And then I got a little more serious about it when I went to China for the first time. I went on this trip with this guy who was unorganized, and, you know, one thing led to another. A year later, I met a guy from China, and he wanted to learn how to sell on Amazon, and I wanted to recreate this guy's trip that was really unorganized. And so we got together and we founded Source in Asia. And that's when we were taking people to China to teach them how to find things reasonably priced that they could then sell on Amazon. And we did that for about 2.5 years. I must have gone 6 or 7 times to China. And on my last trip, we brought this fellow along who was not selling on Facebook, but wanted to meet his agent and just didn't want to travel alone. We found that a lot of people wanted to go to China and didn't really care what we had to offer. They just wanted to have their hand held because it's a very foreign country. I mean, most European countries you get by. Somebody speaks English, you can look at the words and they make sense to you, and not China. As you know, you came with us. Mm-hmm. And he got up on stage and, you know, bless his heart, he wasn't like a guy that walks in the room and you said, oh, there's Bill Gates, he went to MIT. I mean, he was a you know, regular guy, and he tells us he did $8 million on Shopify, and I was like, what? And I said, what am I doing? Why am I building Amazon's list, customer list? Why aren't I can certainly learn how to drive traffic. So being the arrogant top of the world lawyer who had this early crazy success on Amazon, I'm like, I don't need to take a course. I don't need to talk to anybody. I'll just put up something. And I put up this really cool thing. And man, sales were coming in and my ad went crazy. Like I could see I wasn't making like great money, but the ad was viral. Like I made a very funny video for this thing. And I thought, well, the money's going to come. Facebook just has to learn, you know? And my, like 3 months in, I made $48,000. Bam, and I'm posting that picture in my groups, you know. And then I realized that Facebook, I owed them $42,000 in ad spend, which means I lost $16,000 filling the orders because I really didn't have any idea what I was doing. And then I sort of got my head out of my desk and took a few courses, hired a few people that made me understand Facebook is impulse marketing. And even though my ad was viral, it was viral because it was funny, but it wasn't something people wanted in their home. And it was a decorative item. And what sells on Facebook are things that solve a problem on some level. It could be a very minor problem, but it solves a problem. Or just have this wow factor that people can't, you know, like a talking hamster. You know, that doesn't really solve a problem. I guess it entertains your kid for a minute, but something wow. And it was wow, but it was not anything. And so that was when I sort of got, you know, slapped down and thought, wow, I am a child in this business. You know, I went from here, whoop, all the way down. And I just then said, okay, beginner's mind, what do I got to do? And I just dove in. And that Christmas, just in the fourth quarter, I did $750,000 with profit, with 35% profit. Which, by the way, if you're doing Facebook ads, not as easy to do as it was in 2017, but still, you can still do it. Profits are around, you know, for me, I'm not speaking for the world, but 20 to 25 now. And you'll go lower on the front end now because the back ends are so much more built out. Email marketing, things I had no idea about. I did that money not knowing anything about email marketing, retargeting. I didn't know anything. I just had a product that was really good. And so then I started opening other stores, and that's just been taken off. And I slowly got off of Amazon. And now I have a buyer's list of 50,000 people.
Yeah. The lawyer who left to sell on ecom, not knowing how to sell on ecom. Well, actually, still using a rotary phone. But
But I did know marketing. I did know like how I figured out the 10 factors that make something really available to sell on Facebook were
Right.
coming from my lawyer days. What do I need to tell the jury about this kid to get them to feel sorry for him? Like I'll tell you, one of the things that was the most effective thing I did as a lawyer is when there was a reason to have my client arrested, but he didn't do it. In other words, my client is walking with a bicycle in the middle of the night, and there's somebody 3 blocks away who flags down the police saying somebody stole my bike, and the police arrest my client, right? And the guy says, yeah, and he took $12 out of my pocket. My client not only has a bike, but he's got $10 in his pocket and $2 tacos from the truck around the corner. And so there's not a lot I can do in terms of the facts, except for his story was the bike was abandoned. And he just happened to have $10 in the two things, but the bike was just abandoned. He just saw it on the side of the thing and he picked it up, and that was the story. But I made everybody the hero of the story, and I made the jury the best hero. Like, in other words, I want to live in a world where when someone flags the police down and says my bike was stolen, the police drive around looking for someone with a bike. And I want to live in a world when the police see someone with a bike, that they arrest that person with a bike, or at least detain him to find out what's going on. And I want to live in a world where if that person is arrested and detained, 12 people are reasonable and will listen to this without just jumping to a conclusion. So everybody's the hero in that story. So you're selling something that solves a problem. You can't make them feel guilty for their problem. You just have to empathize with their pain and then make them the hero for buying the thing that you're selling, because then you're also the hero for offering the thing. And then the price is the hero for making it affordable. And then the item is the hero for being that perceived value. And so it's just the same idea. Everybody's the hero. We're all happy. And you don't have to call a cop a liar to give me a not guilty verdict. And that's really huge, especially I was practicing right after 9/11 when I was doing serious felonies. I mean, now, today, I could go into court and I could say, ladies and gentlemen, don't trust this cop. And I'm not going to get booed out of the courtroom. 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, don't trust this cop. Who the hell do you think you are? Do you know they went up the stairs in the tower? I mean, whew, different world, right? But you say, hey, they were the hero. They did the right thing. And the next right thing is for you to analyze the evidence. That's what we're here. Isn't this great? This is great. Aren't we having fun? This is fun,
You've got to write a book.
If I can get a man to understand and give a child molester a fair chance, I can help you sell a blue spatula.
That's the book.
That's the book.
That's the title of the book. But you know what? I really don't want to go off on an Amazon tangent, but Amazon always treats you guilty before innocent. And I think I should bring this up because I think it's really important. One of the reasons why you left Amazon, and you were doing all right on Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
But both holidays, I remember the one Christmas that, or it was Black Friday, I'm not sure, but somebody, just anybody, called in and said, you're infringing on my copyright. Wasn't that right?
They said it was fraudulent and it was their copyright. And I wasn't even worried. It was like September, October. I wasn't worried. I had $50,000, $60,000 worth of inventory coming in. I was like, no problem. Here's pictures of me in the factory. Here's 2 years of invoices. This is obviously mine. There's not copyright. There's not an issue. It's not fraudulent. And they didn't resolve it until December 28th. And I sold through that stuff, but I sold through it in May. And, I didn't have $60,000 cash lying around that I could put into something like that. I had a 401k and I had my investments, but I didn't have that. And it happened 2 years in a row. And I'll tell you now, the thing about my Shopify store, I don't buy inventory.
Right.
On Amazon, you can test, if you have a lot of money, you can test 10 products a year. If most people can test 1, maybe 2. I test 3 to 4 products a week on Shopify because all I got to do is put up the picture. And, and I mean, just imagine if no one buys from the picture, then I'm done. And I spend $300 here, $200 there testing. And I know the metrics now well enough to know if this is going to make a little money, make a lot of money, or take off. And And then I did the hybrid, which is I private labeled on Shopify. But I was smart enough and lucky enough, I'm not going to lie, lucky enough to get a company to partner with me. So like right now I'm buying fourth quarter inventory. I want to buy 30,000 units of something that costs $11 each, which is, you know, 1, 2, 3, she's got a calculator in front of her, $330,000, which, you know, no, I don't know how to put this, but let me see, how do I say this? No. And they're paying the bulk of that. You know, we're spacing that up. It's going to cost me about 60 grand.
So in case people don't know what you're doing, and we don't get usually, you know, too involved in business, but what is the difference between the model that you were doing on Amazon and the model that you're doing on Shopify right now?
In Amazon, you have to decide what you're selling, what you want to sell, and then you have to go and find it, get it manufactured or get it somehow private labeled to your own self. Like I didn't manufacture the probiotic supplement, I just put my label on it. Then you have to buy the inventory from the producer and then store it in Amazon so that when it sells on Amazon, Amazon sends it to the customer. In drop shipping, all that you have to do is market the item. You have to put up a picture of it. You have to tell people what it does, maybe make a little video of it, or just take a still photo of it. And then you put it on your website, and then you have to drive traffic to your website. That's the hard part. People go to Amazon to shop. So that is what Amazon offers, and no one offers it better. If you're shopping, you go to Amazon. And for me, I thought I'm willing to learn how to get people to my store in order to get, number one, all of the money, and number two, the customers list and the ability to retarget them and the email list in the future. And so I interrupt your Facebook experience. So you're on Facebook stalking your ex or watching a cat video or taking pictures of your donuts or being a world health expert at the moment, an epidemiologist trained in your living room. And all of a sudden, there's this ad that comes up for a sushi roller. And you're like, oh my God, a sushi roller. I never knew in the world I wanted a sushi roller. Look at that guy. He's rolling sushi. It looks so cool. I can't live without this. I'm getting my credit card. Don't go away. I'm going to be right back. And that's our whole goal in life, is to stop your experience, put this in front of you. And we do that by paying Facebook to let us have ads that run through your newsfeed. And Facebook is creepy, right? And as a person in society, the amount of information they have about us really bothers me. As a marketer, it makes me very happy. So it's you know, a double-edged sword. And that's basically the difference. But you have more responsibility because you have to drive the traffic, but you have more control once the sale comes in. I mean, I have a team of, I don't know, 4 or 5 people that phone people, asking for reviews, seeing if they're okay, trying, you know, I saw answering questions, things like that. You know, replacement refunds. You can't do that on Amazon.
No, you'll be dead.
And I mean, these are, you know, we have comments on the Facebook post. And, you know, so can you imagine if someone is just on Amazon and they see something you're selling, they're like, wow, I like that. You don't know. They're like in Kansas, but on an ad, they hit like, or they comment, this is beautiful. And what do? I pay somebody to say, oh, thanks, Norm, so much for liking it. By the way, sale still on. Here's the link. And what that does is every single person that has commented on that ad now gets a thing saying, hey, someone else commented on your ad. And what do they see when they open that up? The link to my store. And if you abandon cart in my store and I send an ad, then I say, hey, Facebook, I want you to send this ad only to people who put it in their cart and then walked away. When you, Norm, click on the link, it goes back to your cart if you're on the same device, which is cray-cray. I mean, can you imagine that on Amazon? So that might be in the weeds a little much for people not doing e-com, but basically it's your asset, you know, but daddy's not bringing you the traffic. Ain't nobody knocking on your door. I got clients say, I built a website, I built my store and no one's coming. It's like, dude, it's the internet. There's 230 million users. This isn't like some Kevin Costner film. They are not coming if you build it. You got to freaking put it in their face, slap them in the head with it.
Hey guys and gals, this is Hayden Ferrara, the producer of I Know This Guy. Make sure to tune in next time for part 2 of our interview with Elena Saris, where we dig a bit deeper into Elena's time as a public defender. She explains her thoughts on prison reform based on her extensive experience working in the courts of LA. You won't want to miss this one. And as always, make sure to like and share the podcast. Every time you share this with a friend, it really helps us out. I'll see you next time. I know this guy.